Test, test. Can you hear me all right? Test, test. Can you hear me all right? So we'll start shortly. We are just waiting 1 or 2 more minutes, and I'll also fix my webcam. I'll set it out of blur. In the meantime, if you can hear me all right and you can see the share screen, just give me a message so I know everything is fine. Okay, I think we can start. Let me just fix my webcam. Almost. There you go. Okay, I think we can start. Let me just fix my webcam. Okay. Good. Good. So thank you for joining. And today we'll do a manual cloud security configuration review on a vulnerable AWS account. And we'll start with some basic things. I would like to show you how you can log in and authenticate when you receive credentials. But first, let me just share you the link for registering for the giveaway. So again, thanks Ryan for providing us 20 vouchers for the AWS Cloud Practitioner certification, which is a great certification to start with AWS. And also, Ryan helped us with 3 $100 vouchers that we can use on the AWS not marketplace, but merch shop. And I will leave the link. So the link will be available during the live stream, and after that, I will disable the link until we will reach the next session. And and in the next session, we will have other giveaways. This time from Prowler, but we will handle that separately. Just some details. If you register to one, if you register multiple times, it won't help you. So registering just once is more than enough. I'm trying to locate now the form, and I'm trying a new setup. So in case I all of a sudden freeze, or maybe the stream stops, just wait a few minutes and I will come back. I found the link. I will try to leave it in the chat, but also on screen. So this is it. You can take, I mean, the URL is a bit long, but try to take it like this. And in the meantime, I will leave it on our channels. So someone asked if the link is available on LinkedIn or just Twitch. I will leave it on Twitch, LinkedIn, and YouTube as well. So this is the registration form. I put it on LinkedIn, and now let me just quickly go to Twitch and YouTube as well, so that everyone can have it. And in the meantime, if you want, you can register again. And in the meantime, if you want, we will have registered 20 vouchers for AWS Practitioner and 3 $100 vouchers for AWS Merch Shop. I'm having trouble finding the chat on Twitch. Give me one more second. I promise we'll start shortly. I promise we'll start shortly. I promise we'll start shortly. I promise we'll. Okay. Good. And somebody asked if I'm running Arch with Hyperland. By the way, yes, I am, and it's a pain, but it looks good. Okay, I have to leave it on YouTube as well, and then we can start. Sorry about the delay, but in the meantime, maybe others will join as well. So it's all good. Okay. Okay, good. Now that that is done, let's start. So in this session, I want to help you to know everything that you need to know in order to start and ask for the prerequisites for doing a cybersecurity cloud assessment on AWS. The first thing that you need to ask is you need to ask for access, right? And there are multiple ways that you can get that access. And I want to show you the main authentication method that most customers are used to. So that authentication method is logging in the web console. So they will give you, let me just make this bigger. By the way, if it's too small, just let me know and I'll try to uh, zoom in. Okay, so let me just show you how you can log in AWS. I know it sounds weird, but when I first started, when I did my first AWS config review, I didn't even know how to log in, and why not show that to you? So let's go to this URL. Now you will have to mention the account ID, a username, and a password. So from the start, you need to ask your customer, right, about their account ID. So an account ID in AWS is made up of 12 digits. As you can see here, I have my account ID, 12 digits, right? And let's just copy it because I made a user account before the live stream. And now let's just set the username, which, if I remember correctly, was DevCon Cluj. And let's just set the password. Okay, by the way, I'm looking down because I have some notes on a piece of paper. Okay, I remember what the issue was. Good. So that's how you can log in AWS using the web console, and most of the times you will get such an account. So you will get a user account. Let me show you how that looks. So we will go to YAM, which stands for Identity and Access Management, and here we can find the list of users, right? And this is basically our user that we used to log in just now. And when you ask for access, you need a few things, and actually two things you need. So you need access inside the web console, which is this website, this web platform from the browser, and you also need programmatic access in order to run automation tools. Now, if they give you a user account, you will also need a set of access keys. So if you go to security credentials, here you will have access keys, right? And with these access keys, you will be able to use the web, you will be able to use AWS CLI, and you will be able to run tools, to run some commands that will make your life a lot easier. And let me show you how you can do that. So let me think for a second. I already have the access keys configured for this one. And let me just open it. So it would be AWS profile .conf sts get caller ID. Now, I don't want to show you the access credentials because if you copy them, then you will have the same level of access as this user. Now, I did some configuration so that if you're not using my IP address, you will not be able to perform some actions, but it's better to be safe than sorry. So that's why I'm not showing the access credentials from this one. But essentially, once you configure the access credentials in AWS CLI, and I will show you shortly how you do that, you will be able to run commands, and the easiest way to check if the credentials are working is to run this command AWS sts get caller ID. Now you will see that I will just I will check my phone from time to time because somebody is forwarding the questions, and when I have a little break, I will answer I will answer them if they are not related to what we're doing now. So you will see this profile, right? By default, if you are running AWS configure, you will be prompted to provide an access key ID, a secret access key. So let's just do that. Let's say Akia, okay, access key ID, whatever. Region, we will leave EU Central 1, and the default output will be JSON. And now if we run a command without specifying the profile, it will use by default this set of credentials, which is fine. You can do that. But when I'm working with accounts that are not mine, I like to configure them in a profile. If I'm doing this, then I make sure I don't run commands by accident in their environment, right? So let's say I want to run a Terraform script in my environment, and I'm thinking that the default credentials are from my account, when in fact the default credentials are from a customer, and I'm running access credentials in their environment, which obviously is not good. So this is one way to do this. So you need access, you need a user that can log in the web portal, and you also need a set of access keys. So these prerequisites you have to get from your client. They have to create a user, they have to give you the access keys, and only after that you will be able to log in the account. Now, what permissions do you need? Because that's another question most clients will ask. What permissions should we give? And for that, I will just log in the vulnerable account. So we will act from the point of view of the customer, right? So now I'm trying to configure access for a tester so that they can review the environment. And I will go to identity and access management. Let me just zoom in here. I will create a new user. Let's just say config review. So you don't have to know these things, but there will be customers that don't know actually how to give you the right access. So if you have an idea, you can guide them along. You want to check this box, provide user access to the AWS management console. That way you will have access to the web console. Here you can select an auto-generated password that will be prompted after you create the user, or you can set a custom password. And here is an option that doesn't really matter, but it's recommended so that when you log in, you will have to change your password, which is a good thing. Let's click next. Now, in terms of permissions, because this is something important, we will attach policies directly. In AWS, you can grant access to various methods. One method is to use groups. So here are some groups that have certain permissions. And if I add the user to any of these groups, essentially the user will have the same level of permissions as the one set on the group, which is pretty standard. The other method that is rather used is to attach policies directly, meaning that we have here a lot of policies, and each policy has a certain level of permission. And obviously the most interesting one is administrator access, which actually has the highest level of access in AWS. And let's just take a look at it so that we can cover a bit how it works. In a policy, you can have multiple statements, and the statement has an effect, so it either allow or deny. It has one or multiple actions. In this case, asterisk means any action. And then you have resource, which can be, again, one resource or multiple resources. Now, this is this is the most, the highest level of access. It gives access to anything. Let's just take a look at something that's not that broad, right? And we will take a look at read-only access, which is actually one of the options that we can use for the configuration. So this is the read-only access policy, and you will notice that if you see this yellow icon, it means that it's owned by AWS. So they created this policy, and they are doing from time to time updates to it. You can't modify it. You can just leave it, right? And as you can see here are more granular permissions, which we want because this is a read-only access user, and we want this user to not be able to do everything. And we have the service. So this is the standard way of giving granular permissions. You have the service, you have the permission, and you can see that we still have an asterisk here, which means that from this service, we will be able to use any action that starts with get, which is a common way to grant permissions that are either only read-only or are doing a set of things like getting information, listing, searching, and so on. It makes sense. And one disadvantage of using AWS managed policies is that in the end, you will have all resources, or you will have a path here, but you will still have an asterisk because AWS doesn't know how your resources are named, and they give you access over everything. Now, let's just select all the policies that are usually granted for a configuration review, and we'll see some of the differences between them. So we have read-only access, we have security audit, and we have view on. Before we move to the next page, you will see that we also have customer managed policies. This is a policy that is made by us, right? By the owner of the account, and it's a custom one. In this case, this is a policy that grants access over everything. It's essential administrator level access. But if we look at something else, maybe this one, no, not this one. We can have something that's smaller, maybe only on some resources. But in any case, I just wanted to show you how the customer managed and the AWS managed policies are different from one another. But now we selected three policies. You also have the option to copy permissions from other identities. but we will not do that now. We got a question, let me just check it. So you would recommend for customers to build custom policies, or does AWS have already good pre-built policies that work in most of the cases? It's actually a bad practice to use AWS managed policies because they don't have granular permissions. So you won't have the smallest level of access. You will not be respecting the least privilege principle because AWS doesn't know what are the resources you need permissions over, and they will grant usually more permissions than you actually need. So you should define your own policies that grant the minimum amount of policies that you need. Now, after we selected these three policies, we will not remain with all three. We can just create the user. I will copy the password. Now, it shouldn't work for you to use it to log in, but just to be sure, I will save it on another screen. That weird is a very short password. Let me try to copy it again. It's a very short password, but in any case, we'll see how it works. So now we have a user with a password and a login URL, and we will use that shortly. But first, let's see. No, let me just. Yeah, it's a very short password. In case, let me just copy this as well. Good. Okay. So this is our user config_preview, and we have these three policies. Now, the difference between them is not that it is not such a big difference, but it matters a lot. The policy that gives the most access is this one, read-only access. Now, all three of them, they don't grant write access. However, read-only access gives permission to read S3 bucket, read files from S3 buckets, read certain secrets from certain services. So it's truly read-only access kind of over everything, which is not that good because you can read some secrets which I don't think you want, and the customer also doesn't want. One option will be to give you this permission and then attach a custom policy. So this is an inline policy, for example, and let's say we have this with parameters. So we will get everything that has parameter in it. And we will say all resources, and we will put a deny statement. So let me go to JSON, and instead of allow, I will set a deny. So essentially, I'm saying something like you can have read-only access over everything, but at the same time, I have some secrets that I don't want you to read. So I will set another policy with a deny statement, and if you have an allow and a deny, the deny will always win. And if you don't have an allow, the default effect is also deny. But to counter an allow statement, you have to specify a deny. And basically, I will allow you to get access over everything, but at the same time, I will not allow you to read certain parameters or certain files or certain services that I know that are sensitive, and you shouldn't be reading them. And this is good both for the customer, but also for you, because the less responsibility, the better. If your credentials, the credentials you got are compromised, the user will be compromised and the environment will be compromised, and nobody wants that. Now, I will not add this. I just wanted to show you what are the disadvantages of the read-only access. Now, security audit has most of the things that you require. But security audit is missing some things. I believe you can't read the code from Lambda functions, for example. You can't download it, which is not that good. So it doesn't give you the full overview of the environment. But for customers that are a bit careful about their security and they don't want to give you a lot of access, this is the proper middle ground. View-only access is a limited version of the read-only access. So you can view some things, but it's very limited. You can't do what you have to do in order to provide a good configuration review. And once you log in the customer environment, the first thing you need to do is to go to your user and check the permissions you have so that you know what you can do and what you can't do. And you want to make sure that when you are writing the report, you will specify if you had a limited permission, so that in case something is compromised by a real attacker after you've done the configuration review, you can say that I didn't have permission to view that resource, so that's why I wasn't able to identify the issue. But with most customers, I would say to go with read-only access. Don't ask for write permissions. Some customers are giving administrator access to do configuration reviews. If you see that you receive the user with administrator level access, go back to them and say, hey, I don't want this. Change it so that I have read-only access. Because you will run some tools, you will do some things, maybe you will run a command by mistake, and you will actually modify the environment. You don't want that. In our case, we will remove the last two policies because we don't need them. And we need to do a last thing. We need to create access credentials for this user. So now we should be able to log in on the web console, but we also need access credentials so that we can use AWS CLI. And for this one, I will show you the access credentials because you shouldn't be able to use them. You will notice that AWS asks you, why do you need them? So that they can give you some alternatives. Essentially, it's not the best practice to use users for anything, including configuration reviews. However, most customers are more comfortable with giving you users for doing for accessing their environments for a limited time. And let's just call it trade-offs. It's a lot easier for you too, but it's also a lot easier for them, but it's not the best approach. And I will show you then what is the other option to receive access, because it's good to know both of them. Some clients will actually want to not use users to give you access. Now you have to click this to acknowledge that you want to create access keys. Just a reminder that we are still from the point of view of the customer. We don't need the tag value. Let's just create the access keys, and this time let's configure them. So let's do AWS profile CR from config review, and let's run configure. So access key, secret access key. As region, I will set US Central 1 because that's where I know resources are deployed, and I will tell you shortly what's out with the regions, and the output format I want to be JSON. And let's check if the credentials are working. Profile CR STS get caller identity. Okay, so it works. So essentially we are this user from this AWS account. It's very important to make sure that the credentials are working and that you are targeting the right environment. Now, usually when I'm at this point, I am ready to start. I usually start with some tools. I run Scout Suite and Prowler. But for now, we will not use tools because that's for the next session where Tony from Prowler will come and will show more about how to use automated tools to scan environments. Today is about manual configuration and an introduction in the most used services from AWS. Good. So this is the most common option. You will receive a user that you can use to log in the web console with access credentials that look like this. So you will notice that if the access credentials start with AKIA, then they are long-term credentials, meaning that they don't expire. So they will be available until they will be. So this is one way. You need a user with access to the web console with programmatic access and the read-only policy. And you're good to go. Now there's an alternative that involves roles. So roles work a bit different and they can be hard to understand at first, but it's important to know them to avoid having these users that are static and they can represent a big risk because if you expose your access credentials, essentially whoever has them will also have access in your environment for God knows how much time, because most people do not remove their rotate. They do not rotate their access credentials in a timely manner. So roles are a way for you to get another level of access, but only for a temporary time. And let's create such a role. So again, we are from the point of view of the customer, and we will create an AWS role that the tester will be able to assume to do its job. Here we will select an AWS account. We have to specify what AWS account will assume this role, and we will see shortly why that is required. We will select another AWS account, and here, just to make you an introduction, the web console that is with Dark Theme, this is essentially the tester account, and the one with the white is the customer account, right? Just to make you to make it clearer where we are as an environment. And you'll notice that this account ID starts with 977 and this one with 8411. Okay. And we will copy this account ID. So if you are a tester, you will have to specify your account ID. So you will need first an AWS account, and then you will need to specify that account ID to the customer. I will just create this role and then I will answer a question. You have here two options about require external ID. You don't want that because you will not be able to assume it from the web console, and also require multi-factor authentication. This is fine. This can be checked in, but most likely you will not know until the customer will give you the role that you can assume. But in any case, you should have MFA enabled in your account. So even if this check is is enabled, you shouldn't have any problems. Good. And again, we will set read-only access for this role. So for the permissions, nothing changes. And we will say here config review role, no description required. And you will notice something different. We have a trust policy. So essentially, we don't want anybody to assume this role. We only want authorized identities to assume this role because the role gives permissions, right? And that's why we had to specify the account ID so that we will make sure that the role will be assumed only by the tester's account and not anybody else. And we will create the role. Good, and we have it here. Before moving forward, let me answer a question. Who is usually the one setting up the AWS environment, DevOps or sysadmin? It doesn't really matter for you, the tester. From your point of view, you just ask the client, hey, I need this level of access, and you can either give me a user with username and password and access credentials, or you can create a role for my AWS account, which is this one, and I will assume it myself. So it doesn't really matter who from the customer's side will create these things. I honestly don't know who created the roles and users I got for my engagements. They just need to be given to you. And now let me show you how you can assume this role, right? Because the role is created, but it's a bit different on how you can access it. But you will understand why it's a lot better this way. So instead of access a set of static username and password and access credentials, we will use this role from our tester account, right? You need to go here and I don't think I can do it. Switch role. Yeah. So you have to click on switch role. I wonder if what will. So here I am logged in as a federated user, which is a bit different from what we usually have. Let me just sign out. I will close this one. Let me just go to the URL. No, not this one. I need to open a private one. Okay, so here I will log in the tester account, and I will use the access credentials I already showed you. So the defcon user. So this is not the user we just created. It is the user that was already present, is the tested user, right? Good. Let's make it dark so that it's more obvious this is the tester user. So most likely you will have something like this. It will show like this, account and user, and here you have the option to switch role. So from our own tester account, we will be able to move to the customer account, and we can do that because the customer created a role for us, right? So I will just need to enter the account ID and the role name. You can set a display name, but will not mean anything, and you can also set a color if you want to. Let's go with red. It doesn't really matter. And once you click switch role, now you will be in the account of the customer. So it's a lot better to use roles because the the customer doesn't have to worry about the user credentials being being exposed, the access credentials being lost. They just create a user that can only be assumed from your AWS account. And it's up to you to make sure that you keep the security of your tester environment well safe. Now, this is how you can access the web browser. And let me show you how you can access the AWS CLI. So we have our access credentials here. So just to show you again, we are in this account, which is the tester account, and now we will assume the role from the customer. And we will do that by making an API call. So it's AWS, we have to mention the profile, and now we will run STS assume role ARM. We have to specify this full role and role session name, which can be anything. So let's just say config. Good. And this worked because if it wouldn't have worked, we wouldn't have got the access credentials. You will notice that this time the access credential starts with Asia, which indicates that the access credentials are temporary, so they expire. As you can see here, we actually have a field that tell us the expiration time. One problem with using roles is that you will have to refresh your access credentials if you need to perform additional operation. But it's not that big of a deal, and for the customer, it might show that you know what you're doing. So whenever you have the option, try to recommend the customer to give you a role instead of a user, but in the end, it's up to the customer to decide how they want to grant you access. And one last thing before we move forward, just because you perform this API call doesn't mean the access credentials are already configured, and you have to configure them. Now, all credentials are in this file, which I can't show you because I have some other credentials there. But all credentials are in this file, and you can either type them manually, or you can use the AWS CLI in order to configure them. And this is how you can do it from the CLI. So we will create a new profile called CR2, which even if it's from the same account, it's just so that we don't mess things between the persistent access credential. So we have this profile, and we will do configure set AWS access key ID, and this is the access key ID. Next, we will have AWS profile CR2 configured set AWS secret access key, and is this one. And we need another thing, a third thing, is the session token. That's why you can't use the just the configure command like we used initially, because configure doesn't offer you the option to set the session token as well, but you can do it with this in this way manually. So configure set AWS session token, and you have to put everything here. And let's do STS get caller identity to make sure things work. and they do. So now we also have programmatic access in CLI. I just want to wrap this up, and then I will answer the question received in chat. So let's just let's make a list. So you will need to ask the customer for access, and you have to specify something like this. Either user account with username plus password and access credentials, or a role that can be assumed for this AWS account, which is mine, the tester. And actually that's it, because if we can manage to assume the role, we can get the access credentials ourselves. Doesn't matter. We don't need anything else. And we need to specify level of permissions. So we can do it something like this: read only access or security audit plus deny statements if you want. Now, I can tell you from experience that most customers, when you give them these options, will ask you, what do you want? So you will have to, sometimes it's better to just give out a single option. It depends. Just try to talk with the customer and see what are they more comfortable with. And when you are talking about the level of permissions, this it might be easier to keep things simple and just say, give me a read-only access policy on the user or the role, and set some deny statements if you want us to not access certain things. So this is what you should give them, and keep it as simple as possible, because not everyone understands really the benefits and the requirements of doing configuration review. Now let me answer a question. So roles are better since they are more temporary and have an expiration date. Can the account made with roles have a set expiration date? So I guess the question is if you can set the expiration time for a role, which you can do. You can set the session duration, but in case the question was about setting an expiration time for the user, no, you can't set. The most you can do, you can set an expiration date for the password, so that when they log in again, they will be prompted with a form to change their password because it expired. But the access credentials, the persistent access credentials, they do not expire, which is a big issue. Some companies, they have automated ways to rotate these access credentials, but overall, for a company, it's better to stay away from persistent access credentials and try to do things from this perspective of using roles and temporary access credentials as much as possible. Good. So this is regarding access, and it's an important topic because you need to say to the customer what you need, and once you receive that, you can spend time trying things, running different tools, playing with some attacks. But this regarding access, you have to get right, and it will show the customer if you know or not if you know about AWS or not. And if you mess things up from the beginning, they might be reluctant in giving you access since you don't know the basics. So make sure you get this right. Make sure you create your own environment. You play a bit with creating the user, granting the permissions required, creating a role, understanding how it works, so that when times come and maybe the customer will give you a different level of access, or maybe they will try to give you a different type of account, you will understand why and how you can talk with them so that it will show that you know what to do. Good. Look at me knowing to exit game. Okay. Now, before we start the AWS config review, let me show you some basic, I mean, the most used services. And I will show you from, I think I will close this one. Yes, I will show you from my tester account, right? Just to not mess things up in the other environment. So maybe the most used service is EC2, which is essentially a VM, a virtual machine in cloud. You can launch an instance. You have a different options. Let's say this is demo. You can use an image, so it can be all kind of things. Windows, you have even Mac OS, but I will go with Amazon Linux, which is a custom distribution made by AWS. And I will show you some things that you should pay attention to make sure you are not paying a lot of money. This one, the instance type, is very important because based on what you choose here, you will have to pay a lot, so not that much. If you are creating your own AWS account, you will have for 1 year some things in a free tier. See here it says free tier eligible, meaning that in the first year, you will be able to use this instance for free. There are some limitations. I don't remember them right now. I think here they are. 550 hours per month, which is actually a lot. So you can actually play a lot with these instances when you first create your AWS account, which I recommend you to do to better understand how the technology works, how the services are used, to misconfigure some things, exploit them on your own, right? But this, the instance type, just set it to micro or nano. It will not cost you that much, even if you are outside of the first year. I play a lot with AWS, as you can imagine, and I'm paying on month like $2. It's very little. So, but of course, I make sure that after I'm done using a service, I disable it or delete the resource. So that's very important. Don't leave things running. It will cost you a lot of money. Now you can specify an SSH key, but I will not do that because I want to connect in a different way. Here, very important, a security group. So security groups are a bit like firewall allow statements. It will specify what IP can access what port. You can set deny statements. By default, there is an explicit deny on anything. And depending on what you are saying as an allow to security groups, you will give permission to other services or users from the internet to connect to the instance. I will just leave it like this for now. Maybe just select this one as well, doesn't matter. And the rest of it, you can leave it as it is. It doesn't really matter. Something important before we launch the instance. Here you have instance profile. So you can set permissions to the EC2 instance, which most organizations are doing because they need to access some resources from the EC2 instance. Be careful with it when you are running in your own environment, because if your instance is compromised, somebody might be able to exfiltrate the access keys from the instance, and essentially will have the same level of permissions as the EC2 instance. And make sure, even if by default is set to v2, make sure this is v2 and not v1. If we manage to connect to the instance, we will see why. So it asks me if I want to proceed without an SSH key, because it would be harder for me to connect to the instance, but I just launch it this way. If you want to connect to SSH, you can do that. Just create an access key and you will be able to connect to it. As you can see, the instance is already running. Now, I want to use this opportunity to talk with you about regions. Here is where you have the regions. And as you can see, I'm in EU Central 1, which is the closest to me. And I just want to use this region. There are certain services and features that are only available in other regions. US East 1, I think, has the most services and features, but for basic stuff, just use EU Central 1. And let's just change, for example, for EU West 1. What you will see, or better said, you will not see the instance anymore, because the instance was launched in another region. In case you create a resource and all of a sudden you're not finding it anymore, most likely it will be because you are in a different region. If you don't know the region where you created something, well, you kind of have to check the regions or do some enumeration or automated enumeration to identify where the resource was created. That's why it's a good thing to set a default region. For example, I don't think I can do it for this type of user, but you can set a default region, and by default, when every time you log in, you will be redirected to that region. There are companies that are restricting access only to one region, which is a very good practice, because usually what happens, somebody breaches an AWS account and they will start resources in regions that are not maybe monitored or used by the company, and it will take more time to discover those resources. But now let's just get back to EU Central 1, where we have our instances. Let's go to this instance, and I want to modify the security group so that I will be able to connect to it from the web portal, because it's a lot easier than using SSH keys. First, let me try connecting directly to it, just to make sure I can do it. Here is the method that is the easiest one to connect to the EC2 instance. Other options are Session Manager, which requires some permissions. You also have the command for SSH login, and this is the EC2 serial console, which I've not used and doesn't really matter at this point. And as you can see, I'm connected. It's like a SSH connection, but within the browser. And one relevant thing is that metadata API, which is at this address. Oh, right, because it's version 2 and I have to do other things. Let's change this to version 1 and see how that I don't know if I can change it from here. So essentially here you can see instance metadata service version 2, which will require you to make a put request with a custom header. And if you perform that put request with custom header, you will get a token. I think it was here. And with that token inserted in another header, you will be able to talk with this API. Now, this API contains the access credentials of the instance. In this case, the instance doesn't have a role, but if it had, by communicating with the metadata API, I would have been able to exfiltrate the access credentials. In version 1, you don't need all these requisites like making a put request, requesting a token. You can just perform get request like this. And somewhere like metadata latest YAM security credentials, here you will, by making this request, you will get the name of the role attached to the instance. And after you insert the role of the name at the end of the URL, you'll get the access credential. So that's why running web applications on instances with metadata version 1, in case the EC2 instance has a role attached to it, it's a bad practice, because if you have a server-side request forgery, you might be able to exfiltrate access credentials, which nobody wants. Good. That's mostly with EC2 instances. They are basically virtual machines in cloud. It starts very quickly, and you can do a lot of stuff with them. They have a public IP. You can also make them private. You can do a lot of testing. So very, very powerful. When you want to delete the instance, you have to terminate it, and then the instance will be deleted. Good. Now let's go to S3. So S3 are storage. S3 is a storing service. We will create a bucket. Let's just call it demo defcon push. You will see some settings about making it public. You want this to be enabled, so don't change anything unless you want the bucket to be public. I'll try to move a bit faster, so we will cover more. So I will just create a bucket without explaining all the other things. Good. The bucket was created, and now I can just access it, and I can upload files here, folders, and I will be able to download. And now I'm sure you've seen S3 buckets at least at some point, and I'm sure you heard about stories where S3 buckets were public and a lot of secrets or sensitive files were exposed. It happens. Good. I will just delete it. In the beginning, you don't need to know all the settings behind the service. It helps playing a bit with some resources, like creating some things, deleting them, and so on, so that you can understand how they actually work at the most fundamental level. After you understood that, you will be able to follow guidelines, benchmarks, as we'll see shortly. And when you encounter something that is weird, then you should investigate it in more detail. there is no point to spend 3 days understanding everything about S3 buckets when the most common thing you will find about them is that they allow HTTP traffic, right? Like, there's no point in doing that. Just try to understand how to create, how to use at the basic level a resource, and then you will be good. You should be good to go to check the configuration on a real environment. Another important service is Lambda, which is essentially a serverless piece of code that executes in a server managed by AWS. That's why it's called serverless. So let's just create a simple function. Again, setting a name, you have to specify a runtime. I will just choose Python because it's easier for me to write code in it. You can set a role. This is relevant because you can extract access credentials from Lambda functions as well. So it's important to check what role a Lambda function has and who can modify the code from the Lambda. But before doing that, let's create a function. The most interesting aspect in the additional configuration part is enabling function URL. So you can enable this option and you will receive an URL that can be used to invoke the function. That doesn't mean that it will be public for everyone, that everyone with the URL can actually invoke the function, but it's something that you should pay attention to, because usually when a function URL is involved, it might be that the function is also public. Cool. Now this is the code of the function. So we have here like this Visual Studio Code editor, looks really cool. You have the body of the function. You need to have this Lambda handler that will take the input. What I want to point out is that imagine this function had administrator level permissions, which happens. I've seen it in practice. Now, if I have permissions to modify the function, essentially I can do whatever I want, because I can import the Boto3 library and I can make API calls to AWS so that I will create maybe a new user, maybe I will set administrator level permissions to my user. So essentially just by that's how simple a privilege escalation vector in AWS can be. If you have an overprivileged Lambda function, anyone with access to the function so that they can edit the code, they will be able to perform whatever the function has permission to do, including modifying permissions for the user, backdooring things, deleting stuff, and so on. So very important stuff. Let me see if I can just invoke it. Test, I think. Yeah, so it ran and it returned this output. So nothing fancy about it. So most of the functions have a few lines of code, and it's worth checking them for secrets, because it's not good to keep secrets in source code. And you also have some options, but we will see more about it in the config review part. Again, don't forget to delete the resource once you used it. Even if we covered this one, identity and access management, I just want to show you another thing. There are some services in AWS that at the region they will have global. So it doesn't mean in what region you are, because the resource is deployed or created here. they will be available across all regions. And here you have other interesting things like groups, um, identity providers, account settings, but the most interesting resources are users and roles. Usually, these are the problems of all privilege escalation vectors. Um, and let me think if yeah, another service that is relevant, maybe not in the beginning, but it will be is CloudTrail. So this is the logging service from AWS and is enabled by default. It has a retention policy of 90 days. So any API call made in the last 90 days will be available here. I mean, any management event. And you can check, you can enter on each event and check more details. I will not enter now because I have my IP address right there. But it's relevant. And if you want to have persistent logs, you will need to create a trail. That's how this resource is called. And if the account doesn't have a trail in the region where they have resources, even if any region should have a trail, it's a big problem because any breach that happens now over 90 days will not be, the logs will not be available anymore and you will not know what happened. Good. These are the most used services, and I will not spend more time over it. Let me check if I have any other questions. We don't. Let's actually try and start the configuration. So we will use not this one. So we will use the credentials we created for the testing account. So having a bit of trouble between monitors, but I got it right. This is the account we will review. And let's, what was the username? I think it was on review, yeah. And the password. I can't believe the password is so short. I have a typo on the review. I want to say that I appreciate nobody tried the password and change it. So kudos for you. I will just set a password. Good. Now I change the password and I managed to access the environment I have to review. Let me move some tabs over here. I guess I can't. Let me open them again. And let's move this one up. Good. So now we are ready to start the cloud configuration. First thing, I want to change the region. And now let me show you how you can set the default region. I should have here. See all user settings. Okay, and I want to change this one, default region, and I will set it to use central one. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't have to change to check other regions. And that's a big problem when some environments, they have resources in multiple regions and you don't know what region you have to check. I mean, how many regions we have to check. And that's where automation comes in place and is very helpful. But usually I start with one region and see how things go. What I'm in the beginning, I'm trying to get an idea about how the environment is configured, what is its security. I'm trying to make an idea how the environment is used for what exactly. Maybe a cluster, maybe some more applications. That will help me to get a better picture about how things are moving between them. But in any case, manually, I'm just going over the most common resources. Like I'm going to EC2, I'm checking the instances. In this case, there is only one instance. And some of the things I'm really interested in, I want to check if they have a role attached to them. If they don't have a role, I don't care that much about that. I don't care that much about the instance. For example, here, this instance doesn't have instance metadata service version 2 enabled. I mean, it's only optional, it's not required. This is normally a finding. Now, this one is mostly for securing the credentials of the role. And this instance doesn't have a role. Does it make sense to report this vulnerability? Maybe not. This endpoint, this API still has other information like the account ID, the instance ID. It still has relevant information, but if you don't have a role, at most this is an informational finding. Actually, there are a set of findings that you can just group in a category like hardening, and every finding will be informational and you have to put it in the context of the environment, right? Just because the configuration is insecure, it doesn't mean it has a real impact, and you have to check why. You have to understand why that configuration is bad. And in this case, is bad if the instance has a role attached to it. Now, when you are doing a configuration review, you are not checking what's inside the instance, but there can be some sensitive resources out there, meaning that it's relevant what security groups, what permissions at the network level are granted to this instance. And for this one, we can see that as inbound rules, we have all ports over all protocols for any IP address. Maybe that's not a good thing, and maybe this is something worth reporting, especially because if you get inside an EC2 instance, maybe you will find some access credentials that are persistent from a user. Maybe you will find some databases. Maybe you will use this instance to access other private networks from the AWS account. So even if it doesn't have a role, look a bit on, try to understand how this instance is used. Maybe try to get an idea from its name. In this case, it's a name from the said cloud environment that I used for this workshop, together with another vulnerable Terraform script for privilege escalation that I will show you shortly, or I will leave the links in the comments. But in any case, EC2 instance, I took a look here. Other things that I like to check, I'm looking at AMIs, and I'm looking for AMIs owned by the company that are public. That would be a critical finding. So as you can see, if the resources are not present, then you will not spend a lot of time over it. You will check volumes. Here's something that is very common, and it's a finding, is that the volume is not encrypted, which is not good, because when the volume is encrypted, you will have encryption both at rest, but also when the EC2 instance sends data to the volume. So also in travel between the instance and the volume. And it's overall a good thing to have encryption enabled. And this is the kind of finding that is a very low-hanging fruit. And if you don't report it, the customer will discover the finding themselves, and they will ask you, hey, why didn't you report this finding? And then you'll have a discussion with them. So better just report it from the beginning and let them know that it would be better to have this enabled. Same for snapshots. In case they have snapshots, it's very common to see them without encryption. And you might want to check some load balancer if they have resources there. You will notice that this interface has a lot of sub-services, features, resources. In time, you will know where to look and what is worth checking. In the beginning, you would want to check everything. Don't do that. Try to follow some checklists, benchmarks, and tools. And depending on your time, your remaining time, you will be able to cover things that you've never seen before, and you will understand more about the environment. So at this point, I'm still trying to figure out how this environment works and how is its security. So I'm seeing some S3 buckets. I'm just looking to see if any of them are maybe public. And to do that, I have to check the permissions. This block all public access is enabled, meaning that the bucket is not public. That is good. These are checks that we don't really have to do manually, because tools are doing a job good enough in order to determine if the bucket is public or not. You will see on some resources that they have a policy like we've seen for user and roles. These are called resource-based policies. For buckets, they are called bucket policy, but it's just a resource-based policy. And you can say some things here. In this case, it's a deny, but it could have been an allow. And if you have a resource-based policy with an allow, even if you as a user don't have the permission to access that resource, the resource-based policy is evaluated before your permissions, and you will actually be able to perform those actions on that resource. There is a link on AWS, on the AWS documentation, that covers YAM policy evaluation logic, and you can get more details there, but it's a lot of information in the beginning. So just try to understand that the resource-based policy is evaluated before your permissions, and it can actually allow you to do things even if you don't have the explicit allow to do it. But if you have an explicit deny, even if this allows you to do something, you will not be able. Good. Now I won't check the other buckets because there's no point in it. I just want to take a quick look over the Lambda functions to get an idea of how many functions do I have to verify. In this case, it seems that there are no functions, and I will take a quick look over identity and access management to make myself an idea of how much time I have to allocate for privilege escalation vectors. And in this case, 60 roles, 43 users. This is a lot to cover. I've seen environments with hundreds of roles, hundreds of users. It was so bad that I couldn't even run automated tools for checking privilege escalation vectors because the resources were so many that the tool was running out of resources to perform the computation in that environment, which it was a finding in itself, like so many resources that they can be evaluated even automatically. Definitely not a good thing, and that's how you can think when it comes to cloud security findings. It doesn't have to come from a benchmark. If you think it's something that it's not good, it's not following the classical confidentiality, integrity, availability, but also non-repudiation and monitoring, just report it. If it's not good, it's not good. You will have some pushback from most developers, but we will talk in the last session about how you can handle that. Good. So now I kind of got an idea of what I'm dealing with. There might be other resources that are in the environment, but even if they are, these are the ones that require the most time and attention. What I recommend you to do, especially in the beginning, is going to cheese benchmarks. If you don't know about cheese benchmarks, check something quick. Okay. So Center for Internet Security, they are making some benchmarks that are known by the industry, and they are kind of respected, which is good because you can go to cloud providers. You will have to create an account. It's free, but you will have to create an account in order to download their benchmarks. I can tell you it helps you a lot in the beginning. Like in my first security configuration review, I've used the benchmark. It helped me to understand the services, to learn about new services, new configurations, new problems, and it's very detailed. And we will see another good part of using the cheese benchmark is that it explains the problem so you can understand it, and you can also look at the remediation that is in place for providing a fix for the customer. So you just go to Amazon Web Services, download the benchmark. I should be logged in, but I guess I'm not. I just wanted to show you that here are the available benchmarks. Download this one, Amazon Web Services Foundations version 4, or whatever the latest version. The other ones, I've not really used them. I don't find them that helpful, but this one is more general. And we will start with going through the cheese benchmark. I just want to take a minute. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to ask them now. I want to make a recap until this point before we move forward with the cheese benchmark, because it will be the last thing we cover today, unless you have other questions. So to recap, you'll need to talk with the customer and ask for either a role or a user that has read-only access as permissions. If they give you a user, you'll have to ask for username and password and access credentials. If they give you a role, you have to give them your AWS account ID, and they need to let you know what is the role name and their account ID so that you can assume that role. When you receive the credentials, make sure to check them as soon as possible to see that the web console is working and that the access credentials for the CLI are also working fine. As a quick tip, you might have MFA as a requirement, which you can, if you are trying to log in to the web console and you have MFA enabled, you will be asked to provide the MFA. If you are using the CLI, you can still require MFA for the CLI access, and in that case, you will just try to Google it and find the documentation. There is basically a command where you have to specify the MFA for the first two AWS CLI commands, and then it will be cached for some time. I see that we got no questions, so we will try to get started with the cheese benchmark and tell you a bit how it works and how you can cover it. You'll notice that there are 264 pages. It seems a lot. It's not really. It's not, and I don't think I said this, but cheese benchmark is essentially a set of checks that you can perform, and the checks should be in place so that the security of the environment is at a certain standard. Now, it doesn't mean that anything from the cheese benchmark is actually a finding, and you will have to think about some things that if you want to report them. But in the beginning, it helps a lot in understanding the technology and actually reporting some things, because when you report something, if you're not sure about it, you can always say that, hey, it's in the cheese benchmark, it's an industry standard, it's better to let you know about, right? You have kind of like something that backs up your decision in reporting of vulnerability. But it's still a good thing to try to avoid reporting things that are not really a security issue, but in the beginning it happens, and you can do much about it. Something relevant before we get to the findings. You have level 1 and level 2 checks. Level 1 are kind of like really important and can bring a high risk problem in your environment. And level 2 are more like hardening configurations. Like, you don't really need to have them, but in certain cases, it might be good to implement this. And now let me just get to the findings. So here is the first section, identity and access management. And essentially you will have checks for this service, identity and access management. So let me just switch this. So I'm in the identity and access management, and my recommendation in the beginning is to not read the description and rationale if you don't have time. Just start with the audit section. So essentially, this will tell you how to perform the check. And if this is not how the benchmark says it should be, then go back and read the description, rationale, and recommendation. But it will take a lot of time if you're trying to understand every little thing that in some cases you will not really see the misconfigurations present in any account. So that's how I did it in the beginning. I was trying to perform the audit. So here you can see you have step by step how to do that. Some things might be changed from time to time by AWS. The interface will look different, but it gives you a pretty good idea how you can verify something. You just verify it, and if it's not according to the benchmark, then you should go ahead and understand what the issue is, why it is an issue, and then decide if you have to report it. Now, the first ones are relevant, but I won't do them on live stream because they contain some billing details that I don't want to show. I will scroll a bit down until I get to something that we can do. Okay, let's take this one for example. Ensure no root user account access key exists. What does that mean? For now, it doesn't matter that much. So you can see that for some of them, you also have the option to verify it from the console, but also from the command line. That's why if you have programmatic access, it's a lot easier to perform these checks in just a one-liner. So AWS, don't forget to specify the profile. So in this case, the profile was CR. And if I'm not sure about it, I will just do a get caller identity to make sure, especially if you work for multiple customers at the same time, you don't want to mess this up. And I can see that indeed the credentials are right. And now I can run the command. Because I copy pasted it, this doesn't have the profile. Now you can change the profile, this CR profile, to set it as the default one, but I don't want to do that because I might mess things up. So I will just type the profile every time. Good. So account access keys present is 0. And here it says that the output will show access key 0. So this one is good. I will not spend time now reading all the description, rationale, and so on, and I will move forward. Another cool thing is that you have references, additional information, you have references to the cheese control. So it really helps you in reporting this vulnerability really detailed, and also helping you in understanding how the vulnerability is impacting the customer. Now, ensure MFA is enabled for the root user account. So I have the option to check it from console or from command line. I will just do it from command line. Not this too much terminal. Okay, again, I'll specify the profile. Account MFA enabled 0. Let's see. So ensure the account MFA enable property is set to 1, and I have 0. Now I will go ahead and I will read the description, the rationale. I will check remediation. I will check references. There are some findings that are weird to report, and this one is one of them. How can you know about them? You learn in time. Most likely you'll report it once. The customer will say, hey, this actually, we are doing it like this for a reason. And next time you'll understand how that plays in the context of other customers. Now, this issue with root account not having MFA is indeed a problem, But when you are using AWS organizations, which is a service that allows you to control multiple AWS accounts at once, it's hard to set MFA for this user. Some tips now. Recently, AWS introduced a new feature called, I don't know what is its name, but it allows you to manage root MFA or root users across all accounts from the organization. When in doubt, if you are in the Security Cloud Slack workspace, which I left a link for it in the first session, just ask somebody. People are more than willing to help you, to explain you. There are some things that you will not know in the beginning. You can also drop me a message. I'll try to help you out. But when you are not sure about something, maybe try ask somebody or do additional research and see what you find about it, and what others are recommending you to do. In time, you will understand how these things work, but in the beginning, there is no other way. And just like that, we will just continue doing this and checking every finding. Now let's go a bit down to some interesting things. Now, for example, we have this one, which is a bit long. Ensure S3 bucket policy is set to deny HTTP requests. So we have the audit, we have from console or from command line. Now, in the beginning, just try whatever works for you, and in time you'll know what method is easier for doing a certain check. For me, checking for this misconfiguration is easier from the console, which is the web console. So what I'm doing, if I don't have like 100 buckets, I just open each one in a tab. And for each one, I go into permissions and I'm checking the bucket policy. I can tell you that if you don't have a policy here, it means that the bucket allows HTTP requests by default. Not the end of the world, but it's again one of those findings that you have to report, because otherwise the client will get it from somebody else or from some tool, and they will ask you, hey, why didn't you report this? Now, if you check this one, here we have a bucket policy and we have a deny for any principal in AWS. Again, this is AWS principal are a detail that will not cover here, but you should look into it. It's very important. It's about the type of identity within the AWS ecosystem. So essentially, we have a deny for everyone over any S3 action for any object within the bucket and also the bucket. So this is a condition. We can have condition, and there are actually a lot, but you don't have to memorize them. You can just, when you encounter a new condition, you can just search it. But essentially, we deny any action for anyone over all the resources if the secure transport is false. So this is exactly what this check is telling us. And let's just do a quick check over the other ones as well. No policy to display. This means that it's not good. And we have, again, no policy. In this case, what I would do, so now I will try to take a screenshot. I hope my PC won't freeze. Not this one. I hope everyone is still with me. And I panicked and I didn't take the screenshot as I wanted to. So I will take a screenshot like this. I want to cover the name of the bucket and the fact that it doesn't have a policy. And I will just cover either this, or you have it here in the URL. Doesn't really have to, you don't really have to highlight it in two places. And here I will highlight the bucket policy, the section where I'm at, and the fact that it doesn't have a policy. And I will just save the screenshot. And when I report it, when I will report it, I will just say that 3 out of the 4 buckets do not have a bucket policy that will prevent HTTP communication. And here is a screenshot that exemplifies the issue, but at the same time, I will mention every bucket that is affected by its name, right? There are some resources that make more sense to be specified with their Amazon resource name. So this is the full URL of the resource. If the customer gives you access to multiple AWS accounts, you can differentiate between them using this ID of the resource, right? And that's mostly how things are going in cloud config reviews. In the beginning, when you are doing manually, I mean, you don't have to do everything manually, but when you start, I can't recommend anything better than doing this cheese benchmark. Do all the things either from the web console or from the CLI. I can tell you that from the web console, you'll understand more things. And when you identify a finding, then go and read the, let me find it, read the description, rationale, impact, and decide if indeed it's a finding. I'll give you a quick example before I will show you something else. This one, ensure MFA delete is enabled on S3 buckets. I never seen an S3 bucket with MFA delete. But at the same time, most S3 buckets do not have something relevant in them. Imagine there is an S3 bucket with a picture in it that doesn't tell anything. This is overkill to have MFA delete. Now, if you only have view-only permissions, you will not know what that file is. So you will not be able to assess if indeed this should be reported or not. At the same time, some customers might get upset if they see that you download files from their bucket. Not the coolest thing. So you have to find a middle ground between what you report and what you assess to see if indeed it should be reported. There are some services in AWS that will make your life a lot easier. One of them is AWS Security Hub. This is essentially a service that performs the checks from the benchmark automatically. Now you would say that why should I do it manually then if I can just check it here? First, not every customer will have the service enabled, and if they are using AWS organizations, most likely this data will be in a separate account, so that if an account is compromised, it will not mean that this account will be compromised as well, the one with the security hub information. And also you'll notice that here we have cheese benchmark version 3. and we are now at version 4. Even so, here you will find some configurations that are already checked, and you can just go to them and see if they are indeed findings or not. In my case, I enabled this service like 2 hours ago, and the checks are not yet performed over all the resources, but it will look like this. So you have the finding, and you have basically all the information you already have here, but you also have some resources mentioned, some things that you can click to navigate to that page where you have to take the screenshot to show indeed how things are. And that would be from my end. It was a bit longer than I expected, but we didn't cover that much in detail. I hope it will help you in doing your first cloud configuration review. I hope it will help you in asking the client for what you need to verify the access credentials, and then you will have time to play with cheese benchmarks, services, doing manually, automatically, and so on. I will take some questions. Feel free to ask more if you have in the meantime. Don't forget to register for the giveaway for certifications and the vouchers for merch. And in the next session on 28th, we will have Tony from Prowler, and we will talk about using automated tools in doing cloud configuration review. Now, one question. How would you approach an audit pen test of AWS organization that has over 100 accounts? I would use Prowler. So Prowler has a cool thing that allows you to run the scanner across all the accounts, and it will centralize the findings. Now, if you are an external tester and you have to cover over 100 accounts, I would not do it. It's too much. You will not be able to cover them that well, and you have to talk with the customer and be like, hey, I can do a best effort. I can scan them automatically, maybe analyze the critical findings, and give you a report based on that. But think just about it. Spending one day for one account, which is very little, it will take you 100 working days to cover everything. It's just not feasible. But if you are an internal security engineer, I would use Prowler, or I would enable Security Hub across all my accounts and check the findings there. But Security Hub is good, but it's not the most comprehensive one. Not because it can't be, it's just that the tools, the scanners are a bit better at identifying certain misconfigurations. One thing that I didn't mention was about making estimations. You want at least 5 days for an AWS account, especially in the beginning. If you can go higher, if you can go for like 2 weeks, that's even better. It's hard to make estimation on AWS accounts because you don't know what's inside of them. For example, it might be one account. You might be an organization that has every solution in a single account, in a single place, meaning that you will have like hundreds of buckets, hundreds of EC2 instances, maybe thousands of roles, which I've seen in practice. And that will take a lot of time to cover. It's good to, when you discuss with the customer, to ask them about how are you using this environment, what's inside of it, and what do you want me to cover? Because let's take, for example, an account with absolutely everything inside of it, by every solution that the company had. but they want you to review the resources for only a specific solution. So you need to ask, okay, give me the resources, tell me what resources, what is their ARN, their name, and you will have an idea of making an estimation. But I would say lower than 5 days is hard. Maybe you'll have a customer that will say, "Hey, I need the five accounts reviewed." It's not, nobody will pay for 5 days per account when you have that many accounts. Maybe you can do something like a 3 day, but again, specify to them that we can cover it in a smaller amount of time, but the coverage will not be as good. So there's always a trade-off between time and how much you can cover from that account. Okay, we'll just wait a few more minutes in case there are other questions. I know it was a lot. You will have the recording on YouTube and on LinkedIn. We didn't configure yet the Twitch to keep the videos. If you want to donate to DevCon Cluj and help us buying some cooler subscriptions, do some other things for the community, I can leave a banking account in the comments. It helps us a lot. For example, we have an on-site workshop tomorrow, and we will use the money to buy water and other things. So it would be really cool to be able to provide more to the community. Also, I want to thank Ryan Nolet from AWS for helping us with the vouchers for certification and the merch. I hope they will help you starting your cloud security career if it's something that you want. And I'll take another question. Would you recommend for beginners with cloud to get any specific certification or courses? It depends on what you want to do. If you want to go on this path of security configuration review, I would recommend to get the AWS Security Certified Specialty. The AWS Security Specialty certification. It will not help you a lot in terms of practical configuration review, but it will show to customers that we actually know about AWS security, and it's the best certification to show to customers. For example, I have 3 certifications on cloud security. Even if one is from SANS and one from Cyber Warfare Labs, I don't think anybody cares about them because I have the AWS security specialty. But if you want to learn more about cloud security, you can take a course from Udemy that is like $10. You can also do labs from TryHackMe, Hack the Box, Pound Labs, Cyber, CYBR. But these are some resources that I haven't personally tried. In the beginning, the best thing you can do is make your own account, play around with things, check some misconfigurations from Cheese Benchmark, try to understand them, try to start a resource that is misconfigured, try to exploit it, but be careful to not allow anyone on the internet to exploit it, because you might have some problems. In the last session, we'll also cover how to use a testing environment, how to delete everything from it so that you can safely play with whatever you want to learn, because it's important to have this hands-on experience. Uh, what about stickers? For in real life meeting. So as Levi said, there are some cool stickers uh, in in design right now, and we will bring them to the meetups and maybe the on-site workshops. Cool. I think we can close here. If you have other questions, just feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll try to answer them as soon as I can. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the session, and I'll see you on 28th with one.